Hi, my name is Sheila. Welcome to the live. I have not done a live on this channel in a very long time. I think maybe I have done maybe one, and it was a long time ago. In this video, we're going to be talking about the sentencing of Elizabeth Holmes. As you know, she was convicted of multiple counts of fraud, and she has put out a memo asking for 18 months or less and then supervised release with some community service. That's what her attorneys put in the sentencing memo. The government, on the other hand, and I just flipped through this. I had not taken a look at this, so I'm glad I kind of wasn't on camera because I was just like, what? The government is asking for 180 months plus over 800 million in restitution. I have not gone through both of these memos. I did do a short video just to sort of highlighting what she was asking for in her memo, but I have not gone through both of these. Usually when I'm going through documents, I sort of go through them in the video. And I'm going to pull up both of these in this segment and see what they say. And of course, because it's almost lunchtime, I have some grapes here that I'm going to be munching on. All right, let's see if I can pop over so that we can bring some of this up. Let's see. Oh, one of the big issues is I need to have on my glasses so that I can see what I am doing. All right, let's see here. If I can find where I want to go. Helps to have these things up and ready. All right, let's see where I want to go. Meanwhile, things are also popping up on my phone over here. I think this is the U.S. sentencing memo. Let's pull that up and see what that looks like. Yeah, let's take a look at this thing. Okay, so let me scroll back to the beginning because I did have it at the end there so that I could see what they were asking for. All right, so this was filed November 11th, 2022. We see, we see the government attorneys listed there at the top, U.S. sentencing memorandum, and you guys have got a table of contents here. And here's the thing. I'm actually doing this particular broadcast, live video, about this particular question in response to a comment that someone posted on my shorts, which said, I hope they give her leniency. I think part of what's going on here, and I haven't looked at the government's memo yet, we're going to sort of go through that. Part of what I think is going on here is this wasn't so much about money as it was about people's lives. It's hard to say these things are on the same level. So for instance, if you're committing fraud and people only get hurt because you took money, I'm not saying that's bad, but generally money is replaceable to some extent. The fraud that was being put out because of what was going on with her company was a bit different because you were talking about possibly having people's lives on the line. And I think that is what the difference is. I think that is what the government is probably going to be focusing on in this memo. I mean, really and truly, I have a science background and I worked in a public health lab for a little while right after undergrad, which is many, many years ago. And you understand that the test results, they impact someone's next decision about what they're going to do. Do they need to have treatment? Do they need to have surgery? Are there other people who need to be made aware of what your test results are? You understand how important that information is and how important what you're doing is. So yeah, you can't be in that field and be unethical and just sort of doing stuff. Here is the table of contents. We've got the introduction, the facts, the offense conduct. So yeah, there's the investor fraud, the impact on patients, and the cover-up. So they've broken that up into three things. They've got some procedural history here. I hope I won't be going through that. Sentencing guidelines, loss of more than 550 million, offense involving 10 or more victims, offense involving conscious or reckless risk of death or serious bodily injury. What did I just say? Defendant's conduct created a risk of serious harm to theranos patients. Holmes' treatment of theranos patients is relevant conduct. Her role in the offense, and then they're going through the legal standards, the government recommendation, the restitution and fine. Remember, I said I already jumped through the end one time before and looked at that restitution. That is a lot of money. It's not the kind of money most people make in a lifetime. Like most of us don't make that kind of money in a lifetime. We make a lot when you add it all up, but it doesn't look like that. So then we've got all of the cases here. All right, so let's go back and talk about this introduction. Let me get me a grape here before we get started. Okay, so this doesn't go way, way back, and it sounds more like a summary. Over the course of many years, Elizabeth Holmes defrauded dozens of investors of hundreds of millions of dollars. Time and again, she chose deceit over candor. She forged her own endorsements. She preyed on hopes of her investors that a young, dynamic entrepreneur had changed healthcare. She leveraged the credibility of her illustrious board, and through her deceit, she attained spectacular fame, adoration, and billions of dollars of wealth. When a journalist dared to ask questions about Theranos's actual achievements, she tried to dupe him and then attack him along with his sources. After her fraud was revealed, she lied, obfuscated, and concealed. At trial, she tried to blame her COO and longtime boyfriend, her board, her scientists, her business partners, her investors, her marketing firm, her attorneys, the media, everyone that is, but herself. She also put patients at risk. As money was drying up, she went to market with an unproven and unreliable medical device. When her lead assay developer quit as Theranos launched, she chillingly told the scientist she has a promise to deliver to the customer. She doesn't have much of a choice but to go ahead with the launch. As her lab director kept encountering issues with Theranos' device and tests, she chose PR and fundraising over patient care. During her fraud scheme, women received wrong tests about their pregnancies. Theranos generated wrong results for cancer tests, and one victim was led to believe she had the virus that causes AIDS. Even as Theranos itself concluded that there was a possible patient impact for every single test run for patients on its Edison device and voided all Edison tests, Holmes minimized its primary regulators' findings of immediate jeopardy and condition level deficiencies as not major. Holmes speaks eloquently about her desire to innovate and improve healthcare. She has demonstrated a strong work ethic, charisma, and ambition, but she is blinded by that ambition. Her reality distortion field put and will continue to put people in harm's way. She stands before the court remorseless. She accepts no responsibility. Quite the opposite. She insists she is the victim. She is not. Holmes was the CEO and chairperson of Theranos. She repeatedly chose lies, hype, and the prospect of billions of dollars over patient safety and fair dealing with investors. Elizabeth Holmes's crimes were not failing, they were lying in the most serious context where everyone needed her to tell the truth. The sentencing guidelines appropriately recognized that Holmes's crimes were extraordinarily serious. Among the most substantial white-collar offenses Silicon Valley or any other district has seen. According to the pre-sentence investigation report, they yield a recommended custodial sentence beyond the statutory maximum. The factors set forth in 18 U.S.C. section 3553, notably the nature and circumstances of the offense, the need for the sentence to reflect the seriousness of the offense and promote respect for the law, and the need for both specific deterrence and general deterrence demand a significant custodial sentence. With these factors in mind, the government respectfully recommends a sentence of 180 months in custody. The court should also order Holmes to serve a 3-year term of supervised release, pay full restitution to her investors, including Walgreens and Safeway, and pay the required special assessment for each count. All right. Well, they were very clear about what they want there. They're not holding anything back. They want 180 months in restitution. Whoops. And you get to see my little cover there. All right, so facts, the offense conduct. Okay, I'm having a hard time citing this up and down. The investor fraud. Okay, so let's talk about this that the government has put in its memo. Through numerous, and I am not going to read 46 pages of this, the numerous misrepresentations and half-truths Holmes sold investors on the fact that Theranos had a customer-ready device proven through its use and validation by several large pharmaceutical companies, the Department of Defense, and Walgreens, that analyzed tiny drops of blood taken from the finger to produce better, faster, cheaper, more accurate laboratory test results. Specifically, Holmes secured dozens of investors in Theranos over several years by falsely claiming that Theranos had manufactured one single proprietary blood analyzer device that could run any blood test that was run by conventional labs, all from a blood sample drawn via a finger stick rather than the traditional drawn from a vein, with higher accuracy and less variability than traditional methods, due in part to its more automated process that reduced human error inherent in running blood tests in a laboratory. That's a long sentence. I wish y'all had cut that up a little bit more. To support her bold claims, Holmes repeatedly told potential investors that Theranos technology had been comprehensively validated by multiple major pharmaceutical companies and was being used in the battlefield by the Department of Defense to treat wounded soldiers. Holmes also asserted that Theranos was a profitable company and had a healthy, ongoing relationship with retail pharmacy company Walgreens, through which it provided blood tests to patients beginning in September 2013. Not only did several representatives of investors testify that Holmes made these statements to them in meetings, Holmes also began providing written materials and binders to investors in 2014 and 2015 that contained these false statements. In truth, scientists who had worked at Theranos testified that Theranos' proprietary device could never complete more than 12 types of blood tests, often with less accuracy, less automation, and more variability than traditional predicate machines manufactured by third-party companies such as Simmons AG. Because of these shortcomings, pharmaceutical companies did very little work with Theranos and did not validate its technology. And the Department of Defense never used Theranos' analyzer to clinically treat soldiers. Theranos had zero revenue in 2012 and 2013 and desperately needed new sources of cash. Holmes hid the shortcomings. Where did that go? See, this is like hard. Okay. Holmes hid the shortcomings of Theranos' proprietary device by using, without telling potential investors, modified and unmodified third-party machines to fulfill the remainder of Theranos' available blood test menu to patients at Walgreens stores. As a result, Theranos' relationship with Walgreens was faltering because the percentage of traditional venous draws was too high. But none of this information was shared with investors in Theranos. As but a few examples of misrepresentations made by Holmes to the investors. Okay, let's scroll down here and see if we can get a few of these misrepresentations that they have included in this memo. In April 2010, Holmes emailed executives of Walgreens reports with favorable conclusions about Theranos' technology that were emblazoned with logos of large pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline, Schering-Plough, and now Merck. And Holmes described the attached reports as three independent due diligence reports on Theranos systems that were from those companies. However, at trial, Holmes admitted that she added the logos of the pharmaceutical companies to reports written by Theranos and enhanced the conclusions shortly before sending to Walgreens. And while a Pfizer representative testified at trial that he told Holmes directly that Pfizer did not see a use for Theranos technology in 2009, Holmes continued to send the doctored Pfizer report to investors throughout 2014 and 2015. He told her in 2009, she was still sending it out in 2014 and 2015. In 2010, Holmes told Steve Bird, then CEO of Safeway, that Theranos was cash flow neutral and projected revenue for 2011 of $223 million, when in truth Theranos' revenue was steadily declining from approximately $2.8 million in 2009 to less than $600,000 in 2011. Despite Theranos earning zero revenue in 2012 and 2013, Holmes and CEO Ramesh Bhawani provided investors with projections that Theranos would earn $140 million in revenue for 2014 and nearly $1 billion in 2015. Indeed, Holmes told one investor in December 2013 that Theranos had historically earned over $200 million from its work with the Department of Defense and pharmaceutical companies, when in reality, Theranos had never earned more than $10 million from both sources combined. In August and September 2013, internal Theranos scientists, including longtime employee and the laboratory director, warned Holmes that Theranos' proprietary device was not able to reliably test patient samples. They both testified that Holmes pressured and rushed the scientists to quickly validate assays for clinical use in advance of the launch with Walgreens. Both ultimately resigned shortly before the Walgreens launch because of concerns with reliability of running patient tests on Theranos' proprietary device. Okay, but when Ms., and I don't know how to pronounce her name, and I don't want to mess it up, when Ms. G informed Holmes of her concerns, Holmes responded that she had made a promise to deliver to the customer, Walgreens, that she must fulfill. Despite these internal concerns being voiced repeatedly to Holmes, Holmes reviewed and approved an article in the Wall Street Journal claiming Theranos' device could run 1,000 laboratory tests with more accuracy than conventional methods. Holmes shared the article with investors. In 2013 and 2014, Holmes repeatedly told investors that the Department of Defense was using Theranos' proprietary analyzer on medevac helicopters in the battlefield or to treat soldiers in Afghanistan or Iraq. In truth, the Department of Defense never used Theranos' device to clinically treat patients, nor did it ever move out of initial testing phases. One investor victim impact statement captures the depravity of Holmes' lies in this respect as follows. I feel strongly that the sentencing should take into account defendants' intentional decision to prey upon investors' reverence for our servicemen and servicewomen in the armed forces. Our country's freedom is protected every day by the courageous and selfless service of these men and women, and the defendants took advantage of investors' patriotic feelings for selfish gain through deceit. Indeed, Elizabeth Holmes lied to me about saving soldiers' lives through military contracts and Theranos' use of proprietary technology on military helicopters. Simply put, Holmes' actions were loathsome and un-American. And this was a victim impact statement of Craig Hall. Let's see, they added another one here. In August 2014, Bhawani forwarded to Holmes an email from Walgreens executives expressing a desire to reduce venous draws to below 10%, whereas they had been hovering around 40% for most of the year before expanding further. Nevertheless, Holmes presented financial projections to at least one investor in October 2014 that projected Theranos would increase from being in a few dozen Walgreens stores to being in 900 locations by 2015. Holmes exploited investors' altruistic motives to dupe investors of all experience levels to invest in Theranos. Holmes fooled investors who were new to healthcare investment sphere, as well as investors with deep sophistication and experience in the healthcare and biotech sector, such as PFM, a regulated investment entity led by managing partner and chief investment officer Brian Grossman, who had over 20 years of experience analyzing and investing in companies like Theranos. Mr. Grossman testified that he sent lengthy due diligence questions to Holmes and Balwani to ensure there was no ambiguity about the limitations of Theranos' proprietary technology. And yet he was shocked to learn more than 18 months after his investment that Theranos used third-party commercial machines and not exclusively Theranos' proprietary device, as Holmes had previously led him to believe. Former Secretary of State George Shultz invested in Theranos on behalf of his family members, and as his son and daughter-in-law described in their victim impact statement, Holmes succeeded by using my father and others and played him for the fool. Holmes often seized upon investors' desire to make the world a better place in order to lure them into believing her lies. For example, leader Lisa Peterson, a representative of investor RDV Corporation, was moved by Holmes's pitch because she could envision the benefits Holmes promised Theranos could deliver on her husband's health condition. Holmes and Balwani knew this and even sent text messages to each other, such as, "They also care about our mission to do good because they are a religious org," to which Holmes responds, "Good." While Holmes was publicly touting Theranos as a revolution in healthcare, she and Balwani quietly and repeatedly acknowledged the dark reality within Theranos to each other. For example, they text as follows. Okay, we have to work together on the rev piece. You are the company. We need revenue. Pissing me off. We don't have anyone managing PSC. I don't know what some of this is. Production, cart production. Okay, they're talking about some of the assays. I know, need to focus on ops, lab customer service. Yeah, rebuild. Fundamentally, we need to stop fighting fires by not creating them. Need to fix the root cause. So yeah, there are a lot of text messages that they included in here. In a note to herself, Holmes said Balwani was convinced. I'm sorry, I'm getting so distracted by my phone. I'm going to turn it over. In a note to herself, Holmes said Balwani was convinced never happened ever. Not Thanksgiving, not ever. Balwani, Holmes wrote, bemoaned there was no product and the effing mediocre quality of this piece of company. When they drew government scrutiny, Holmes and Balwani bragged about their ability to run circles around others and FDA by manipulating their game. Yeah. All right. Holmes's fraud was spectacularly successful. At the peak, she was one of the richest and most celebrated women leaders in our country's history. By the end of 2014, Holmes's shares in Theranos were valued at more than $4 billion. She took home hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual salary. She traveled in a Theranos paid private jet. Let's see. Holmes and Balwani musing about getting a plane for these short journeys after C2, which was a reference to a C2 investment round. She and Balwani ruled Theranos from a $15 million mansion in Atherton. She donned the cover of Fortune, Forbes, Inc., Glamour, and the New the New York Times Style magazine. I think we got just a little typo there. She dined at the White House. Here we go again with me trying to slide this. She dined at the White House. She gave the commencement address at Pepperdine University. She joined the Board of Fellows of Harvard Medical School, and at the peak of the fraud was named by Time as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Between 2010, when she induced Walgreens and Safeway to invest based on false pharmaceutical company endorsements and fantastical revenue projections, and March 2015, Holmes raised hundreds of millions of dollars. It says investors who invested subsequent to Theranos' public relations push in September 2013 during this conspiracy. Over 700. So they're saying, as the PSR notes, over 730 million came from this Series C1 and C2 investment round. Representatives of 7 such investors testified in the trials. At least 8 additional investor and investor representatives were interviewed by the government, testified before the SEC, and submitted victim impact statements. And you see some of those listed there. And you can see who some of these people are. These are people who run in these circles. Yeah. All right. Sentencing memorandum. It says the 730 million plus investments does not include an additional 70 invested by Walgreens and Safeway on account of convertible promissory notes, and 3 million invested by Director George Schultz, who testified in PFM's civil action against Holmes and whose family also submitted a victim impact statement. Okay, let's get to the impact on patients. Throughout the relevant time period, Holmes touted Theranos as a company that would revolutionize blood testing, making health information more reliable and more accessible. Beginning in late 2013, Theranos actually offered clinical blood testing services to the public, first in the Bay Area, then in Arizona. To jumpstart the process of making its tests available to the public and to reach as many patients as it could, Theranos partnered with retail pharmacy chain Walgreens, a company with a nationwide footprint that can make Theranos' product accessible to most of the country's population. In doing so, Holmes and Balwani benefited from goodwill and credibility associated with the Walgreens name. There can be no doubt, again, for anybody who's coming on in the middle of this is the U.S. government sentencing memo for Elizabeth Holmes. There can be no doubt that, as with investors, patients were more comfortable trusting Theranos because they assumed that an established business like Walgreens would not promote a service that was not similarly legitimate and reputable. You know what they say, birds of a feather flock together, right? Thus, Walgreens was not only Theranos' launch pad, but also its de facto ambassador. Throughout the partnership with Walgreens, defendants pushed for wider and faster expansion, with Walgreens holding back and expressing concerns over Theranos' inability conduct much of its testing using its vaunted fingertip method, among other things. Despite Walgreens' hesitations about expanding the Theranos partnership more rapidly, thousands of patients ended up receiving blood test services from Theranos between 2013 and 2015. The evidence at trial revealed something Holmes and Balwani worked hard to hide from those patients. Theranos' proprietary testing was not reliable. Theranos' homegrown TSPU device, used for several important tests, including HCG to assess the presence and stage of a pregnancy, PSA to check for potentially lethal prostate cancer, and TSH, a measure of thyroid health, was plagued by issues. It broke down frequently, and when it did return results, it suffered from serious accuracy problems. Erica Chung, a Theranos employee who operated the TSPU to generate patient test results, had the following to say about her faith in the technology. I was really stressed and uncomfortable with what was going on because I had at that point amassed a lot of evidence to suggest that the technology, the Edison device specifically, were not adequate to test on patients, and I did not feel comfortable running patient samples. She went on to explain that she was concerned about patients who think they're getting accurate results and they're making very important medical decisions about what their treatments are, what their diagnoses are, what medications they take. Dr. Rosendorf agreed that the Edison device was flawed, explaining that he resigned from his job as Theranos' lab director partly because he was being asked to vouch for tests that he did not have confidence in, and he felt that the testing platform was not allowing him to function effectively as a lab director. Similar problems arose when Theranos used modified third-party devices to test fingerstick samples. Dr. Rosendorf testifying that the Theranos modifications to third-party devices made them less accurate. Okay, so both of them were not alone in their concerns about the reliability of Theranos technology. Ms. G, a senior scientist who resigned from Theranos upon learning of the company's plan to use its Edison 3.0 and 3.5 devices to conduct clinical testing for patients. She explained she knew of reliability issues with those devices that were not fully resolved, affecting their ability to return consistent results. Given the dim view that Theranos' own scientists took of its technology, it is no surprise that a number of Theranos patients received results that were suspicious or demonstrably incorrect. For example, Dr. Mark Burns testified at trial about a patient named Ms. E who sought PSA, a patient, Mr. E, who sought PSA prostate specific antigen testing from Theranos in advance of an international trip. Now, you know, I changed that from Ms. to Mr. E. Theranos reported Dr. Ellsworth's PSA levels, and this was a doctor, okay. Dr. Ellsworth's PSA levels to be extremely elevated compared to his previous results, a change that could have indicated prostate cancer if accurate. Dr. Ellsworth's next test from Theranos, however, showed normal PSA levels. A third test from Theranos was once again dramatically elevated, but subsequent testing returned normal results. Wow. It turned out that the two unexpectedly elevated PSA results from Theranos had something in common. They were both run on a Theranos proprietary system, whereas the normal results had been generated by traditional FDA-approved methods. Dr. Burns was able to conclude that the elevated PSA levels indicated, where did it go? Yes, I got so lost here. Oh, let's see if I can find where I was. All right, Dr. Burns was able to conclude that the elevated PSA levels indicated by the Theranos specific test were not valid. Theranos' repeated failure to return an accurate PSA test result after multiple attempts using its proprietary equipment speaks volumes about the reliability of Theranos technology. All right, now I'm going to scroll. Theranos patients also experienced problems with the company's PT-INR test, which relates to blood clotting. Patient AT suffered from atrial fibrillation and her AFib, and her doctor instructed her to obtain a PT-INR test from Theranos. Although her PT-INR level was normal between 2 and 3, Theranos returned an unusually low level of 0.08. AT's doctor did not believe the Theranos results could be accurate and sent her to a traditional lab for confirmatory testing, which yielded a result of 2.8 in her typical range for that assay. AT told government investigators that had she adjusted her medication in response to the erroneous low Theranos PT-INR value, she would have been at risk for internal bleeding, a common complication of AFib. Theranos' own employees were not immune from questionable results, e.g., a Theranos phlebotomist who had been on blood thinning medication for years due to a history of blood clots. When she went to Theranos for a PT-INR test, her results came back markedly different from her usual levels, and her doctor adjusted her medication in response. Due to skepticism over the validity of the Theranos results, EG had a confirmatory test performed at a traditional lab and received results matching her usual values, showing that the adjustment to her medication had been unnecessary. Several Theranos patients received erroneous HCG tests, providing inaccurate information about the status of their pregnancies. We'll call her BG. And her treating nurse practitioner, Dr. Z, testified at trial about multiple dubious HCG results provided by Theranos in October 2014. Let's scroll down a little bit. Oh, now we made it just huge. All right. Ms. G, who had suffered multiple miscarriages in the past, obtained a series of HCG values from Theranos and traditional lab Quest diagnostics over the course of a week. The Theranos results, which included a dramatic drop in HCG value, strongly indicated that Ms. G was having another miscarriage, but confirmatory testing by Quest indicated a viable pregnancy, and Ms. G went on to deliver a healthy baby. Dr. Z testified that she doubted the accuracy of both Theranos test results received by Ms. G and stated that she had never had accuracy issues with HCG tests from other labs the way she did with the results for Ms. G. Unfortunately, Ms. G's experience with Theranos HCG test was not unique. All right, let me see if I can pull this up a little bit. And so this is a lot of information about the impact on patients. Let's see here. Yep, definitely a lot there. All right. All right, let's click back over. So in May 2014, a physician had called Theranos about HCG results that turned out to be unexpectedly low and would have suggested a miscarriage if accurate, prompting the company to collect another sample and rerun the test. 5 months later, a provider contacted Theranos to explain about Theranos's HCG test that had suggested that a pregnant patient was miscarrying. In response to that Theranos test value, the patient's doctor had her discontinue pregnancy medications and get ready for her next cycle. When the patient was tested again for HCG, however, her value was over 2,000 and a subsequent scan detected a fetal heartbeat. When Holmes learned about the erroneous test results, she asked Balwani, how did that happen? A strange question from someone who had been aware of problems with Theranos's HCG tests for months. All right. It's impossible to know exactly how many times frightening scenarios like these played out in the lives of patients who trusted their blood testing to Theranos. The government's investigation of Theranos did not reveal a centralized, comprehensive log of customer complaints. Instead, that information was apparently stored in multiple places and compiled as needed. Equally alarming is the high likelihood that numerous patients relied on inaccurate blood test results from Theranos without ever realizing that they were unreliable. It is likely that some portion of Theranos patients experienced harm to their health as a result of invalid Theranos test results without ever realizing the cause. The evidence available paints a bleak picture of Theranos' ability to return valid results using its TSPU analyzer. Internal quality control checks at Theranos provided a valuable objective measure of how accurate the analyzer was. Analyzing standardized samples with known concentrations of the substance being tested, the Theranos machines would either pass or fail daily checks of individual assays. In March of 2014, records indicate that nearly 26% of the quality control checks on the TSPU resulted in failures, i.e., inaccurate results. Some of the individual assays performed even worse. Theranos' PSA test failed quality control nearly 30% of the time, and the company's test for triodithyronine, hey, I'm trying, failed more than 50% of the time. Because there is no guaranteed way to identify inaccurate patient test results, Theranos' poor QC numbers are the best available method to estimate how frequently Theranos was sending incorrect values to patients. All right, so they've got more here. They talk about the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and the issues they had. Okay, so let's go to the cover up. The cover up. In April 2015, Holmes learned that a Wall Street Journal reporter was working on a negative story about Theranos. This WSJ guy might show up tomorrow. She and Balwani scrambled to have the Phoenix store prepared to perform only finger stick tests rather than vein draws, hoping to avoid the possible impression Theranos was doing ordinary blood testing. We need tomorrow to test, and then the team can push production tomorrow night. So Wednesday it will be trigger FS for GC. Okay. Let's scroll down. Whoops. Ultimately, Balwani told Holmes the team is not confident about pushing out finger stick tonight. We don't want to rush this. We went through hell. Unable to dupe the reporter, they then hired David Boies to try to get him to drop the story. When that failed, Holmes personally appealed to the owner of the Wall Street Journal, who was also a significant investor in Theranos, to quash the story. Holmes also attacked those she believed to be the reporter's sources. In June 2015, she had a man sit all day outside of Erica's new workplace to serve a letter. Okay, so this is from the law firm, threatening her with legal action. After the reporter published a negative story, Holmes tried to dismiss Ms. C as a low-level disgruntled employee. She also had the lawyers surprise Tyler Schultz at his grandfather George Schultz's house to have him sign an affidavit identifying himself as a source for the reporter. Yeah, it says if Tyler thinking about George, FYI, at right time. You not calling George back also sends a message that we're about to suit. The incident enraged George Schultz, which he described as one of the worst little things he had seen anybody try to do. All right, George wants to know what Tyler has done. Would you ask David if I should say or tell him? We'll let him know after. Text me back. During this time period, Holmes and Balwani also discussed nailing this MF in Clea, who they believed to be spreading negative information, and at various times contemplated action against Tyler, Erica, Adam, and Rochelle, the wife of a Theranos scientist who committed suicide in 2013. When the negative Wall Street Journal story broke, Holmes lied and dissembled. On October 15, 2015, when confronted on Jim Cramer's Mad Money with the journal's claim that Edison could only do 15 out of 240 tests, Holmes falsely stated every test that we offer in our laboratory can run on our proprietary devices. At the time, Theranos was not using Edison or any future iteration of its device for any test and had never used Edison for more than 12. On October 21st, 2015, she falsely stated at a public conference that Theranos never used commercially available lab equipment for finger stick-based tests. The comment so concerned Balwani that he texted, "Worried about your all finger sticks on our technology" comment. I'm sure he was. Months later, Holmes continued to withhold information from RDV and other investors, which made it impossible to make informed decisions about the status and value of our investment. She insisted the issues CMS identified were not major and downplayed their significance. Holmes's cover-up had lasting and devastating effects. According to one victim impact statement, Holmes intentionally lied to Schultz and about Tyler to discredit him to prevent Schultz from learning the truth, creating a permanent rift within the family. The most heartbreaking of all is to hear your son describe that he contemplated suicide because he felt abandoned, isolated, threatened, and hopeless for doing the right thing. All right, and that was a victim impact statement of Alex and Janelle Schultz. All right, procedural history. Okay, so I am going to skip the procedural history part. Loss of more than $500,000. Yes, it was a lot. That's a whole nother video. I should talk about that in a whole nother video, just the money. Offense involving 10 or more victims. So the government goes into that. And we've already talked about the risk of harm to patients and heard some of that. Government shared some of that information in there too. Holmes's treatment of Theranos patients is relevant. Holmes was a leader and organizer. This is first, there can be no dispute that Holmes was an organizer and leader of the criminal activity charged in this case, satisfying the first requirement for this 4-level enhancement. The fraud was otherwise extensive. Argument. So they're going through the legal standard and government recommendation. So I'm going to stop here just to talk about some of the factors here. Okay, the factors the court should consider in determining the appropriate sentence include: one, the nature and circumstances of the offense and the history and characteristics of the defendant, the need for the sentence imposed to reflect the seriousness of the offense, to provide just punishment for the offense, to afford adequate deterrence to criminal conduct, to protect the public from further crimes of the defendant, and to provide the defendant with needed correctional treatment. The third, the sentencing guidelines and related Sentencing Commission policy statements. Fourth, the need to avoid unwarranted sentence disparities among similarly situated defendants. And five, the need to provide restitution to the victim of the crime. So, yeah, so that's how they are coming up with what they are ultimately arguing here, which is what we're going to get to next. All right. Because they then break all of those four down and go through. Let's look at these. Furthermore, a review of certain specific sentences imposed in similar cases demonstrate the wide range of custodial sentences imposed in large dollar fraud cases. While each case is different, there is precedent for courts to impose significant custodial sentences in white-collar cases. So you have Charles McCall. Amount of loss was probably 8.6 billion. He got a sentence of 120 months with no cooperation. Walter Forbes, more than 1 billion, 151 months. Yeah. All right. Let's see. We're getting down to the end. Let's see. Yeah, all of these are really high. Jeff Skilling, more than 80 million. All right, restitution and fine. All right, conclusion. And then here's where what they're asking for. For these reasons, the government recommends the court sentence the defendant to 180 months in custody in order her to pay 803,840,309 restitution and a special assessment. I think, did I put 700? Maybe I put the wrong amount up there. I'll have to take a look at that and see. Let's see what I put up here. No, I got it right. Over 800 million. That is a lot. That is a whole lot there. So that's it. That's a lot. It's over 40 pages of information that they have put together. I needed a little something for me to get through all of that. So yeah, so over 800 million in restitution, 180 months in custody, and then that to be followed by supervised release and community services. Of course, she's asking for 18 months or less, 1/10 of what they're asking for. And I don't recall seeing any restitution on hers. I think I'll have to do hers in a whole nother video. But let me know if you think 180 months is too much. Do you think, paying back the money? Now, I didn't go a whole lot into how they came up with the money and breaking that down. I was really more interested in them talking about the background and the patients, because the money piece, I mean, that's your typical white collar crime, fraud, conspiracy, those types of issues. But it was this sort of health component when people are relying on you and the information that you're provided so that you can give them, so that they have accurate information so that they can make health decisions. Like, that's a whole different level of fraud. And I think, again, that's why they have elevated the sentencing there. And I think that's why they're looking at wanting substantial time for her. This whole thing is just very unfortunate. In another video, I'll dive a little bit more deeply into her memo and what she is proposing, which, as I said before, I did a shorts video on that. So it's 18 months. But let me know your thoughts, whether or not she needs to receive some leniency here. All right, that's it. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and peace. Now let's see if I can shut this down. I think my glasses back on.